The Empire's hubris. The vast expanse of space shimmered outside the observation deck of the Va-30 Imperial Citadel, a colossal station orbiting the Empire's homeworld. Within its towering halls, the Empire's greatest minds gathered in the War Council chamber, their golden ceremonial armor gleaming under the artificial lights. The air vibrated with the low hum of discussion, but none dared speak over Supreme Strategist Keth Varos. Varos stood at the center of a massive holographic display, his four clawed hands clasped behind his back. The simulation projected before him showed a swift, overwhelming victory. Dozens of Ivary fleets descending upon Earth and its colonies, obliterating resistance in days. He turned to face the assembled warlords, his reptilian face impassive. The Terran Confederation is an infant among the stars, Varos declared. His voice, smooth and calculated, echoed through the chamber. Their fleets are primitive, their defenses laughable. They lack the strategic foresight to counter us. In mere cycles, they will be kneeling before the Empire. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. The High Emperor, Zalvotor, watched from his elevated throne, his crimson eyes gleaming with satisfaction. To the Va-30, war was conquest, and conquest was inevitable. No species had ever resisted them for long. A figure in a hooded, diplomatic robe stepped forward. Ambassador Salas, a human defector who had sworn allegiance to the Empire. His voice was oily, his manner servile. "My lords, I have provided you with everything you need to crush my former people. The Terran leadership is weak and divided. They will fall without resistance." Varos nodded. "Then it is decided. We strike in one cycle. Our forces will annihilate their border defenses and move directly toward their core worlds. This war will be nothing more than a formality." A chorus of approval filled the chamber. The decision was final. The invasion was inevitable. A whisper in the darkness. That night, the palace corridors were silent except for the rhythmic steps of Imperial guards patrolling their routes. Deep within the citadel, a high-ranking general, Varnak Jor, poured himself a glass of fine crimson liquor in his private quarters. His scaled fingers traced the rim of the glass as he reviewed the final battle plans on his data tablet. He never heard the whisper of movement behind him. A flash of steel, silent, precise. Varnak Jor slumped forward, the light in his eyes fading as a blade retracted from the base of his skull. A figure in the shadows caught his body before it could make a sound, carefully lowering him to the floor. The assassin moved like a phantom, clad in a sleek, form-fitting suit that blended seamlessly with the dim light. His face remained hidden, his work cold and methodical. Retrieving the data tablet, he swiftly altered the battle plans, inserting subtle errors, coordinates that would send supply convoys into ambush zones, attack formations that would collapse under their own weight. With one final glance at the lifeless general, he disappeared back into the ventilation shafts, leaving no trace. The Empire would wake to find one of its finest generals dead, the cause labeled an accident. But the war had already begun against them. The first cracks in the Empire. The next morning, alarm bells rang across the citadel. News of Varnak Jor's untimely death spread like wildfire. The official report claimed it was due to an unexpected medical failure, but behind closed doors, the War Council whispered of foul play. At the same time, a crucial weapons manufacturing facility suffered a catastrophic failure, delaying production on the Empire's latest warships. Engineers were baffled. There had been no prior malfunctions, yet an essential coolant system had mysteriously shut down overnight. Strategist Varos dismissed both events as coincidences, though the faintest hint of frustration crossed his features. "One dead general and a minor production delay will not stop this war," he declared. "Ensure replacements are assigned and proceed as planned." But deep within the citadel, in a dimly lit chamber hidden from all eyes, a single human operative, codenamed Ghost, watched from the shadows, his mission far from over. The Empire had made one fatal mistake. They assumed the war hadn't started yet. The phantom within, the infiltrator, Deep within the heart of the VA-30 Imperial Citadel, Callum Ghost, Voss moved unseen through the labyrinthine corridors. His infiltration had taken years, years of training, biological enhancements, and meticulous planning. Ghost wasn't just another operative. He was a weapon, honed by the Terran Intelligence Directorate for a mission so delicate that even the Confederation's highest-ranking officials knew only fragments of it. His body had been surgically and genetically altered to pass as VA-3. His bone structure subtly shifted, his skin infused with chameleon-like pigments to mimic their hue. Contact lenses masked his human eyes, making them glow with the same predatory red as his enemies. His vocal cords had been altered, allowing him to mimic their clicking language with terrifying precision. The identity he had stolen, Commander Varek Thelos, was flawless. His fabricated military record had been carefully inserted into Imperial databases, and no one questioned his presence within the Empire's most sensitive war councils. A war of shadows. The first phase of his mission was complete. He had sown the first seeds of disorder. A dead general, corrupted invasion plans, a sabotaged weapons facility. But Ghost knew this was just the beginning. The Empire's war machine was vast. It would take more than a few disruptions to halt its momentum. Tonight, he had another target. Slipping into the control hub for fleet logistics, he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged. No one even glanced at him as he accessed a secured terminal. His fingers moved across the interface, embedding false deployment orders and scrambling essential supply chains. With a flick of his wrist, he planted a data worm into the network, a self-replicating virus that would ensure the Empire's fleets were always one step behind the chaos he orchestrated. By the time he left, every invasion fleet would suffer unexplained delays, misplaced supply shipments, and misaligned troop movements. The Empire would never notice until it was too late. The hunter awakens. But Ghost wasn't the only predator in the Citadel. Commander Zevran Thrall, head of Imperial Counterintelligence, stood in his dimly lit office, reviewing a holographic display. His piercing gaze scanned the reports. Unusual malfunctions, an inexplicable assassination, now a suspected breach in fleet logistics. "This is not coincidence," Zevran muttered. His twin reptilian eyes gleamed in the dim light as he replayed surveillance footage. Someone had altered the war plans. Someone had killed General Jor. The VA-3 were a species built on dominance, their empire spanning hundreds of star systems. They had never lost a war because they had never fought one on equal terms. This sabotage was different. It was surgical, precise, a level of deception and infiltration they had never encountered before. A ghost within their ranks. Zevran's claws tapped against his desk. He had dealt with spies before. The Empire had crushed rebellions and sniffed out insurgents in the past. But this was different. Whoever this infiltrator was, they were inside the highest levels of command, operating flawlessly. He would find them. The close call. Ghost had just finished his latest act of sabotage when he noticed something off. A subtle shift in the way security patrols moved. The quiet way officers spoke to one another, as if expecting something. He knew what this meant. They were hunting him. Moving quickly, but without panic, Ghost changed direction. He walked with purpose, blending into the sea of officers and analysts in the Citadel halls. If he ran, he was dead. If he hesitated, he was dead. As he rounded a corner, two security officers locked eyes with him. Ghost nodded in acknowledgement, mimicking the confidence of a superior officer. They hesitated, then let him pass. But Zevran Thrall was watching. Later that night, Zevran studied security footage, scanning the crowd. Then he saw it, a fraction of a second where an officer's gait, his stance, his presence felt wrong. Not VA theory. Human. His eyes narrowed. "I have you now." The hunt had begun. The Empire consumes itself. Fractures in the War Council. The VA Theory War Council was in chaos. The High Emperor's throne room, once a place of cold, calculated strategy, had devolved into a battlefield of words and accusations. The Empire's greatest warlords, figures who had crushed entire civilizations beneath their fleets, now bickered like wounded beasts. "This is sabotage," snarled Admiral Cavos, his talons digging into the edge of the war table. "Fleet supplies are missing, entire squadrons are out of position, and our invasion plans have been altered without authorization." "The humans couldn't have done this," countered General Zithel, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "They lack the intelligence, the precision. This is an inside job." Silence fell over the chamber. The accusation hung in the air like a blade, its weight pressing down on every officer in the room. High Emperor Zalvotor leaned forward, his crimson gaze sweeping across the gathered leaders. "Then tell me, General," he said slowly, "who among us is a traitor?" No one answered. The war was unraveling before it had even begun. Zevran's trap. Deep within the Imperial Citadel, Commander Zevran Thrall studied his board. The infiltrator was close. His instincts told him that this saboteur, this ghost, was embedded within the highest levels of the Empire's command structure. The signs were too perfect. This wasn't some reckless rebel. This was a master. But even the best could make mistakes. Zevran devised a trap, an irresistible opportunity. He fed false intelligence into the Empire's system, hinting that a vault of classified war protocols had been moved to a secure data chamber. If the infiltrator was still active, they would try to access it. All Zevran had to do was wait. Ghost walks into the lion's den. Ghost knew something was wrong. The classified vault he had uncovered in the system felt too obvious, too exposed. It smelled like a trap, but he also knew that if the Empire had uncovered his work, they would have already locked down the entire Citadel. He had no choice. Moving with the confidence of Commander Varek Theloas, he strode through the security checkpoints. His altered physiology fooled retinal scans. His fabricated credentials granted him entry. The door hissed open, revealing a cold, sterile chamber lined with glowing data consoles. He stepped inside. Then he felt it. That brief, fractional delay before the door sealed behind him. The faintest scent of recycled air, different from the usual ventilation systems. He wasn't alone. The confrontation. From the shadows, Zevran Thrall stepped forward, his piercing gaze locked on a ghost, analyzing every inch of him. The way he stood, the way his hand hovered near his waist, close to a concealed blade, the way he didn't flinch. "You move like a soldier," Zevran said, his voice low. "Not like one of us." Ghost didn't react. His mind raced. There were no visible weapons in Zevran's hands, but Ghost knew better. A hunter didn't need to bare his claws to be dangerous. "Commander Theloas," Zevran continued, circling him. "Or should I say something else?" Ghost knew the next few seconds would decide everything. He could try to talk his way out, but Zevran was too sharp. He could try to fight, but he was still inside the heart of the Citadel. Escape was the only option. His hand moved in a blur. A pulse grenade, small, compact, dropped from his sleeve, activating midair. Zevran lunged, but Ghost was faster. A flash of white light. A burst of electromagnetic disruption. Ghost moved, his enhanced reflexes carrying him through the failing security locks before the alarms could even trigger. By the time Zevran recovered, the infiltrator was gone. But now there was no doubt. The Empire's greatest enemy was already inside their walls. Victory without war. The war that never began. The VA-Theri Empire was unraveling. Paranoia gripped the War Council. Fleet commanders no longer trusted each other. High-ranking officers vanished, some assassinated, others executed as supposed traitors. Military supply chains collapsed under the weight of contradictory orders, sabotage, and misinformation. And yet, the Terran Confederation had done nothing. Not a single human warship had fired shot. Not one soldier had landed on an enemy world. The Empire was crumbling from within. The final strike. Ghost watched from the shadows of a private data vault deep within the Citadel. His mission was almost complete. His final act of sabotage would be the killing blow. A custom-designed AI virus, one of humanity's most advanced cyber weapons, had already spread through the Empire's vast military network. Fleet coordination, weapons targeting systems, resource logistics, communications. Within hours, it would all collapse. Ghost placed the final activation key into a secured relay terminal, embedding the virus so deeply that not even the most advanced Aetheri countermeasures could purge it. The Empire's military would cease to function. By the time they realized what had happened, it would be too late. The Empire devours itself. Back in the War Council chamber, the situation had spiraled beyond control. The High Emperor, Sabotage, roared in fury, his claws gouging deep scars into the throne's armrests. How has this happened? Who is responsible? But no one had an answer. At that moment, the first critical system failure struck. Fleet-wide communications blinked out. Ship engines locked in diagnostic loops. Weapons refused to fire. Then came the coup. Admiral Cavos, believing the Emperor compromised, turned his fleets against the capital. Within hours, Loyalist forces and separatists clashed in orbit, turning the Empire's homeworld into a battlefield of its own making. The war they had planned against humanity had become a war against themselves. Zevran's realization. Commander Zevran Thrall stood alone, watching as the Empire burned. He had spent his life hunting spies, crushing revolts, ensuring the Empire's supremacy. He had believed in its power, in its invincibility. But now he understood. The war had never been lost on the battlefield. It had been lost before it even began. There had never been a human army. No grand fleet. No massive invasion. Just one man. One infiltrator had destroyed an empire. The ghost disappears. By the time the first Aetheri civil warships turned against each other, Ghost was already gone. His work was finished. His war was won. No one in the Terran Confederation would ever know his name. There would be no medals, no celebrations. But somewhere on a distant human world, another covert mission brief was being prepared. Another war that needed to be stopped before it even started. And Ghost was already walking toward his next target.